Kansai. My name is Natasha Delaney, and I'm the founder of Indigenous Projects and Events. Indigenous Project Events is a full-service corporate event management company that specializes in Indigenous experiences. We also have a Indigenous Speakers Bureau, and we offer specialized Indigenous experiences for corporations. Today, as part of the Indigenous Projects and Events Speakers Bureau Speaker Series, we are going to be introducing and interviewing Jay Lambert, who is a Métis-Cree and French Canadian coach, speaker, and consultant with extensive experience empowering Indigenous leaders and communities. His expertise blends Indigenous knowledge systems, healthcare system transformation, and a coaching approach rooted in holistic well-being. Jay partners with Rachel Patero at Rise 2025 to expand Indigenous coaching practices and empower leaders to create sustainable change. And without further ado, here is Jay. Hi, Jay.
Hello.
I'm so glad that you're able to join us today. Just making it clear, Rachel Patero at Rise 2025.
So Rachel is my coach mentor. I received my training through her. She is an Indigenous, or she's a Maori woman, and
Maori.
runs a leadership training program, coach training, as well as coach training program. And her coach training program is the first Indigenous coaching program accredited through the International Coaching Federation. So I'm very proud to be a part of that. I'm the first male. Her program's actually female focused, but of course accepts any allies. And I'm the first male to receive accreditation through her program.
Congratulations. Where is your nation? You're Métis and Cree. So where does your family historically come from?
So I was born in Edmonton, and my father. So my mom's French Canadian, St. Paul, Alberta. So about 2.5 hours north of Edmonton, sort of the prairies. And then my dad was born in Fort Vermilion, where my grandparents also lived most of their lives. My grandfather was a fur trader between the Lubicon Cree and the Hudson's Bay Company up in northern Alberta. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet him. He passed before my parents even met. But my grandmother was a residential school survivor from St. Haughty Mission in Fort Vermilion.
Wow,
and then roots with of course roots in out to the Red River settlements and such. But my ancestors left there during the resistance time. They were didn't really feel like getting into the politics.
Yeah, that is a very extensive knowledge of your history and your ancestry. What does being Indigenous mean to you, knowing what you know about your ancestry?
Well, for me, really strong connections to the land. That's and also a holistic and integrated view of things. So that's what I bring to the work I do, to all the work I do. I'm kind of got lost of where I want to go with that.
So in terms of being able to incorporate some of these holistic views in the culture within the work that you do, when you speak and facilitate, how does that look?
Yeah, so that it takes into account the whole person. So when we're at work, we sometimes compartmentalize. Okay, I'm going to be this at work. I'm going to be this at home. I'm going to be this in a certain friend group, and being those different peoples can actually be a bit of a challenge. And so being able to bring our identity into our workspace, whether it's an Indigenous workspace or not, and come and show up as our authentic selves, recognizing our various experiences, even as Indigenous people, First Nations, maybe Inuit. Some of us have really strong connections to our communities. We've grown up on reserve, have been part of the cultural ceremonies. And then some people, especially 60s group survivors, are just reconnecting and or even just sometimes just finding out that they have those roots. And so bringing in all that, but accepting people where they're at, and helping them live as they are and bring their authentic selves to work, I guess, and their family and everything.
I love that, because me also being a 60 scoop survivor, like I fall within the just made it category. So I'm also part of the millennial scoop. Like I think the 60 scoop, the end date was December 1991. And I went into care in December 1991. And then the millennial scoop starts in December 1991. So I fall like literally right in that same month of being able to claim, I guess, both of those names, Millennium Scoop Survivor and the 60 Scoop Survivor. And also someone who's returned back to the culture in the last 6 years. That is something that I really have struggled with, is figuring out because not only am I founder of Indigenous Project Events, but I'm also a coach for Indigenous women entrepreneurs. And so how can I show up authentic? Like, what does it mean to be authentically Indigenous? Going and returning back to that culture and doing sweat lodges and doing Sundance. In my mind, I'm like, but that's not who I am. Like, I'm not sacred, and so when I think about Indigenous people, I think of sacredness. I think of, like, to the land, as you said, like, you're to the land, you're quiet, you're calm, you're collective. And those are all very good qualities to exhibit, but sometimes that's not who I am. Sometimes I'm loud, sometimes I'm like boisterous and like, and I feel like I do get a little bit confused sometimes when it comes to like, what does being Indigenous actually mean?
Well, and I think because Indigenous is such a broad term, but I'm using it because again, I'm Métis. However, most of but I didn't grow up necessarily traditionally Métis. Although as I'm learning my culture, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, things did filter in because my grandmother, being her experience, actually, she did not admit to being Indigenous Métis. If anything, she was a bit racist. It wasn't until we found out that she actually was a residential school survivor that it was like, oh, okay. And then it also explained a lot of things. But just again, meeting people where they're at and supporting them in that journey of connection. Because I think there are certain things that are very inherent to us, even if we haven't been informed of it. And that goes for even in community. Like, I've been working with First Nations communities mostly for a good 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about elders, certain elders are very spiritual and cultural. Others are more knowledge keepers about, say, hunting practices, knowledge on the land, and stuff like that. It may not carry the ceremonial knowledge that others do, and that's okay. And I think being able to identify where you fit, and then leaning into that strength, and not one's not better or worse than the other. It's just finding that spot of where you belong in the community.
I was actually just having this conversation with one of my coaching clients about these strengths, these inherent strengths that we have as Indigenous people and what that looks like. And for her, she's a beater. So she works with her hands, and she's learning how to tan the hides and utilizing harvesting all of these materials so that she can use as part of her art, right? For me, that was not anything I was ever interested. That's not how my brain worked. For me, I create with my businesses. I create in that way, right? So being able to, I agree, also accept that things can be translated in different ways in terms of how we create, and in terms of that ancestral knowledge.
Exactly. Like, generally, I find, well, and even myself, I find myself when I think of Métis culture, I stereotypically go to jigging and fiddling, and that's not me. But when I think of, okay, well, my grandfather, he was independent entrepreneur, worked between cultures. So again, it had relations with the white business, Hudson's Bay Company, but then also had to uh, have relations directly with community. And so that's me, when the space I'm sitting in right now, that's me living out my culture, is as being that connection between the two worlds.
So, in terms of the work that you do with the nations, and I know that you work with a broad target audience, but specifically with the nations that you work with, how does that look? What is it that you exactly do? And then, in terms of speaking and topics that you love to focus on, tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I'll start with coaching. And so, as a coach, I offer one-on-one, group, and team coaching. And really, what it is I just hold a space for people and ask, and whether again it's an individual or groups or teams, but I hold that space and just ask questions, believing that they have the answers. They
Mm,
just need a safe space to really think things through, process, um, based on the what comes up in the conversations. Will prompt another question that can help them dig in further and further. But I really believe most people understand what, already know what they need. It's just a matter of processing it and figuring out their best path forward. And as somebody who's worked in where there's been a lot of top down um, solutions, even for myself, where it's like, okay, you need to eat better, or you need to do this, and it's like, yes, I know that, but I'm stuck in figuring out how to actually take those steps. So for me, I received some coaching that really helped me move through that stuckness
mm,
and find the path that worked best for me. And so when I think of communities that are saying like nothing for us without us, this is my way of supporting that, in that I'm not coming to be the savior and tell you exactly what you need to do to figure it. In fact, I don't give advice at all in my coaching.
mm,
It's really about pulling out what they need for themselves. That being said, I am finding that there are some skills that could be useful, and so I've been leaning more into leadership training, and supporting and building off of the coaching, helping people build their self awareness, really understand what their particular strengths are, and how to show up in those spaces. And then on the speaking side, I speak a lot to resilience. So what I've
mm,
seen a lot of experienced myself is burnout and compassion fatigue. And so, speaking to that, from kind of a higher level, sharing my story of not only experiencing those really low lows of depression, anxiety. I had adrenal fatigue, which basically meant I was um, almost non-functional. I was sleeping all the time. I had brain fog. To I am no longer on medications. I am like, my anxiety is basically gone. My depression is managed on my own.
yeah.
Um, and so those are things that, especially if you haven't experienced it before, you might feel that that's not possible. And I'm not guaranteeing that you can get rid of your anxiety and depression, but there definitely is the potential there, to live a much better life, thrive, and particularly for our leaders in the spaces, have that impact that they're wanting to have, whether it be taking care of their communities, making things better, uh, building businesses that support economic development, and so on and so forth. Like, yeah, it's really hard to do that when you're not well.
Yeah. You mentioned compassion fatigue, and I've never heard that term before. What is compassion fatigue?
Well, it's a fairly common term in the healthcare space, but it's just when you're supporting people who are having difficulties on a day-to-day basis, and it can be in your work environment, and it happens a lot, particularly for healthcare workers, nurses, social workers where they're supporting people who are maybe struggling with the worst of the worst, addictions, what have you. But it also could be at home, supporting family members that are also unwell due to age, health conditions, who knows. And it's just when you're giving, and not taking care of yourself, not recovering, it's another form of burnout, really. It's kind of a vicarious trauma, in fact, is that by being exposed to it and not having the opportunities to take care of yourself, recover from that that work, uh, it actually burns us out. And then as you get burnt out, you have less capacity to be compassionate in your work, compassionate at home with your kids, your spouse, partners, whatever. So it's actually, yeah, it's very common. And I think it's very common in a lot of places, but it's particularly common in the health and wellness space.
Yeah.
And we just maybe sometimes don't have a label for it.
So what I'm hearing is that your target audience, not just for your coaching, but also potentially for speaking, maybe health leaders within the health and wellness industry.
Yeah, health and wellness, for sure. But even I have worked with a few business owners who, again, are looking to have an impact in their business, and they've got some big plans, but again, juggling a business, especially maybe in startup phase or a scaling phase, and all the other demands of life. So family, community, especially if you're a leader in your community, you often have other responsibilities that you have to manage. And yeah.
So why did you decide to get into this space in the first place? Was there a problem that you were struggling with and this was a solution for you? Or
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I've been working in healthcare for over 20 years now, really working in the innovation and transformation space. Requires change, and people struggle with change. Even when they want the change, they want the outcomes of the change, but actually doing the change, going from doing things one way to another, is often quite challenging.
was that, are you speaking more collectively? So are you talking about organizational change, or are you talking about individual change?
Both. To do organizational change, you really have to have individual change. So you can implement a new system process. Most of my work initially was in information technology, virtual care. However, if an individual or a group of individuals are resistant for whatever reason, or they don't even have to be resistant, if they don't have the tools, the resources, the understanding to adopt the change, then the change won't be successful. And so, even before I became a quote unquote coach, I was spending a lot of time supporting people through the change. Coaching through the International Coaching Federation just became another tool in the toolbox. However, seeing the impacts of coaching, again, on myself in particular, and this is where I became passionate and decided to leave my employment and pursue this full time, was, yeah, seeing the difference. So again, I've gone from being burnt out, sleeping all the time, overweight, going on my road to diabetes, and now I've got that all under control, and I'm healthier than I've been in probably the last 10 years.
How did we do that thing the last time? Oh, right. It's not doing it this time, but normally the fireworks go off and.
Oh, yes. I think,
it was this?
there we go.
There.
Still not sure how that happens. Well, obviously I know why it happened or what I have to do, but I'm not sure what settings I've got for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how do you see your work impacting Indigenous communities, both in the short term and the long term?
So short term is, yeah, just really building up the capacity of our leaders. So their personal capacity to just do the work and continue. There's lots of demands. and moving into the longer term, as we have those successful leaders that are staying well, that are um, um, uh, achieving the outcomes in their work that they're, whether it's a business or a health organization or a community organization, well, then that impacts their teams. Like if they're well, they're approaching things in a healthy and well perspective, well, then that impacts their staff. Then that impacts the work, and then that further impacts the work that they're doing. That's also why I like working with teams, because you can have one person's transformation has an impact, but when you can actually impact a team working collectively towards some things, you can do some really amazing things.
Yeah, it sounds like you become a better problem solver, and being able to identify the challenges that need to be shifted and have that transformation. And so when you can do that collect or individually through working with you, you're able to create that change collectively as the leaders of the organization or the company.
Yeah, so really bringing people together, so that, because here I'm on the West Coast, and so we often talk about paddling together, and it's important to be not just at the same pace, but like at the same strength, and really being in sync. And when you've got that sync, you really go. But if and I've had this, actually, we went paddling as a team once, and we literally actually had one of our team members paddling in the opposite direction, just couldn't figure things out. And it makes things difficult to go forward when you have somebody not just out of sync, but going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that is a great analogy. So what changes or improvements would you like to see in how Indigenous projects and events are supported in the future?
I think for that, I just really acknowledging that that intent doesn't equal impact. So over my years, and I know everybody kind of knows this inherently, but we seem to forget it when it comes to ourselves, is just because I have a good intent with what I'm proposing, trying to do, doesn't mean that that's automatically mean that that's going to have a positive impact. I've worked with a lot of researchers who have actually had some really great ideas, and were doing important work. However, the approach that they were taking was harmful to the communities that they were hoping to work, or uh, it would have been harmful if we had let them go. Out in the role I was in, I was working for the Assembly of First Nations as a research and policy analyst. So part of my job was to actually be a screener and an advocate for the communities. But their intents were great. In fact, the topics that they were looking to study were great. However, their approach was not in partnership with the communities. It was very much kind of an outside looking in, and that's a general, and that's just an example of kind of what happens a lot is you want to make a difference, you go and do it, but you don't do that proper engagement and partnership. Actually, it's not just engagements, it's actually really partnership, and it's whether it's research or any type of project, really has to involve the communities. It should be building the community's capacity, and it really it needs to be thinking, and it needs to be getting that feedback, because the community, again, why I love coaching is community knows best what is going to work for them, what isn't going to work for them. And then they can also, like, you can come in with your knowledge, but they can help interpret that in a way that's actually going to be most helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, even in terms of myself, thinking about me returning to the culture, learning ceremony, learning protocols, and, creating these corporate experiences. So really integrating Indigenous culture with enterprise. How can I do this in a way that's safe and it's not harming people? And so I find it's super important, to pray beforehand whenever we're meeting with somebody. I always acknowledge the elder that I learned from before I make really, really big decisions as well, because you're right. It is super important that we are acknowledging the actual experts and professionals and knowledge keepers within our communities, Indigenous or not.
Oh, absolutely. Because I know, again, I'll use the academic world, but having a PhD means you does mean you know a lot in one particular area. I actually have found a lot of it's kind of like the more specialized in PhD, and I'm just going to pick on PhDs, but the more specialized you get, the harder it gets to know those other things and see things from kind of a more holistic perspective. And so we need those people. I don't want to totally beat up on them. We need those experts who just really can drill down into the details, but we need to put them again into that integrated whole and have them connected to all the other aspects that are important to a successful project, whatever that may be.
I was literally just having this conversation the other day with a colleague about how, further education potentially actually decreases our level of our ability to be more open-mindedness, like creates more of closed-mindedness and really limits potential and opportunity and innovation.
I've definitely seen that. I like to think that people who are pursuing advanced education are open are open, but yeah, you're right. It's not always the case.
So, what message would you like to share with others who are watching this about the importance of supporting and uplifting Indigenous initiatives and entrepreneurs like yourself?
Just I think that we bring a real different approach that's missing in mainstream. So my coach training is Indigenous, and I'm now co-facilitator in the program that I took. And it's interesting. Having worked with some of the students who have practiced their coaching with other coaches who have got Western developed programs. And I actually had somebody that said, no, that's not coaching. And it's like, what do you mean that's not coaching? It's ICF accredited and everything, because they're they weren't thinking in that holistic, whole person, integrated approach. That was just like, no, we're gonna hit those numbers, we're gonna hit that goal. Whereas being much more purpose driven rather than just say sales number driven or whatever is I think something that I really want to convey is having that curiosity of the whole.
Creating more impact over capitalistic transaction.
Yeah, again, purpose. Like, yes, I think businesses are very important. And particularly small businesses. But when you start to get into the big corporations that have shareholders and stuff like that, it's kind of the purpose kind of gets just making money. Whereas I don't know of an Indigenous entrepreneur who is more purpose driven. Yes, they want to make money. They want to be able to support their family, create generational wealth, make sure their kids are able to have the advantages that maybe they didn't. But it's a lot more. I can't think of the word now, but supportive of them, not just themselves, but their community and the betterment of the world, not just putting money in the pockets.
Yeah, it's almost like changing your perspective about what value actually means. So value is not just monetary value, but value in itself means so much.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's not just again putting money in the bank, but actually and buying the fancy car or truck. But it's about being able to take care of ourselves, our families, and as your business grows, your community, like the broader society.
Jay, where can people find you?
I have a website. What was my website again? jlambert.ca, and I'm on LinkedIn and occasionally, not so much on Facebook or Instagram, but mostly LinkedIn and through my website.
You can also find him on www.indigenousprojects indigenousprojectevents.com if you are looking for an amazing speaker and Indigenous business coach. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you.
Hi.